Good afternoon, everybody. Give me another minute or so to get everybody in here. All right, let's go ahead and share. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start. Thank you all for attending this webinar with the In the Garden series. This particular one is Landscaping with Native Wildflowers in Georgia. I'm Lisa Klein with UGA Extension in Gwinnett on the Agriculture and Natural Resources team. And I have lots of good webinars planned for the next grouping that will be through May and into June and July. We have a lot of good stuff coming up this spring. And this is one that is done by Bodhi Panisi, Dr. Panisi. She is with Extension in one of our specialists, and she does a lot of native wildflowers, doing a lot of studies with them, and she's a very busy woman. But she's got some really good stuff, so we like to share that. And I know there are a lot of folks out there that have an interest in native plants. So I thought I would borrow her presentation and give myself a break since we had a huge plant sale last week that sucked up all my time. And we were very successful, by the way, so I'm quite happy about that. But this week, we're going to do our lunch and learn on native wildflowers. So native wildflowers are, pretty interesting. I think there's a little bit of a misnomer in what constitutes a native wildflower. And so you'll learn a little bit about what that actually is, what a native is, what a native isn't. You'll learn about nativars, which that might be a new word for some of you. Others might know what that is, but yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so what are native plants? Well, so those are going to be plants that grow just all by themselves in a particular region without any assistance from humans. So that could be stuff that you have back in your backyard where you haven't cut the grass in a while. Um, it could be something that was brought in to a particular area prior to European settlement. So that would be a long time ago, basically something that would be considered during Native American times. Um, or something that has been in a particular region for thousands and thousands of years. So there's, as you can see, there's not one definition of a native. There are many definitions of native. There's also the federal government's official definition of native. And those are naturally occurring plants, either presently or historically, in an ecosystem of the US. So what you'll learn is that some things that are native also can be bordering on invasive. Uh, Invasive is another word. I know that's kind of a hot button issue, and there are some folks that think that just because it's a native doesn't necessarily mean or that it's or should I take that back. Just because it's native doesn't mean that it doesn't have some invasive tendencies. There are some native plants that are great and we love them and they're perfect for certain environments, still thinking right plant, right place. But there are some that are considered native that do tend to grow quite fast, might be a little on the invasive side in certain conditions. And so let's learn a little bit about what those are and what you have to look for. Okay, so why would you want to plant native plants? Well, there's lots of good reasons. Personally, I don't have a lot of time. I still like to get out in the garden, but I don't want to have to maintain something, meaning I don't want to have to go out there and water it all the time. I don't want to have to prune it all the time. I just want a very low maintenance landscape where it looks great once it's established, and I just don't have to do a lot to it. I can enjoy the time that I have, little as it may be, at my house. So, why? A low maintenance, self sufficient green space. Once it's planted, you can fix it and forget it. You would also want to provide wildlife habitat. So, wildlife habitat meaning food, habitat for it to live. And that could be anything. It can be butterflies, it can be beetles, it can be, deer, anything. Ecological preservation. You see that dimpled trout lily there in the bottom right. There are a lot of wildflowers that you'd see in some bottomlands and up in the mountains that are threatened, and their habitat is not as plentiful as it used to be. You've got a lot of people that build up in the mountains now. A lot of that area gets disturbed, and boom, you just don't have the biota that you used to. Habitat protection and preservation. So that's something that kind of that speaks to all citizens in Georgia and really in every state. Every state is going to have particular species of plants or animals that are endangered because of man coming and encroaching in their territory. You have other animals and plants that do better in disturbed or more urban areas. All we have to do is kind of look in our own backyard to see that. We have some things that do much better in suburbia, including animals like deer and possums, raccoons. They're pretty common. They've figured out how to coexist with man. And so are certain plants. They have figured out how to coexist with man. And they may be natives and they may not. There are some that are a little less tolerant of being around people, but we all have a, um, a I guess what I'm trying to think of the correct word, an obligation to try to preserve what we can and not just steamroller over everything. So what plants, native plants, are going to be best for residential landscapes? I know we all want some showy stuff. We want it to be pretty as well as functional. We here at Extension espouse trying to protect pollinators. We want to increase the habitat for pollinators. That means more bees. That means more butterflies, more moths, wasps, all the pollinators. We do have the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. That's every single year, third Friday and Saturday of August, and we encourage you to participate in that. If you follow along here in my webinars, I usually have a webinar in early August that kind of talks about that and tells you what you can do as a citizen scientist to kind of do your own. It's very simple, very easy. 15 minutes, a pollinating plant, you're counting some bugs, and then you just upload your counts to the website. Very simple and definitely helps us keep tabs on populations of pollinators so we can stay ahead of the curve if something bad we're kind of coming down the pipeline. Anyway, back to this. So what plants are going to be best for attracting pollinators? So host plants. We want to think about host plants. So what are those? Some of you may know, some of you may not. Host plants are going to be typically those plants in which pollinating insects, specifically butterflies or moths, need to lay their eggs for their young, their caterpillars, their pupa, to feed on. And they are very species specific. So some of those butterflies might have 5, 10, 15 different species of plants that they can feed on, and some may only have one or maybe two. So having a really good variety of plants out there is very important to keeping the populations of pollinators stable. So these particular host plants are going to be plants that were adapted to the area. So we're in the southeast here in Georgia, and so those plants are going to do well in this area. That means they're adapted to the climate. They co-evolved together with those insects to provide them what they need, and they get some kind of benefit out of it. That also means, and this is a benefit to people, they're often deer resistant. So if you're living in the suburbs or you're any place where you have a heavy deer population, that means that they're less likely to be munched down by deer. That deer will find other things that they prefer more than these plants, and that's good. That's important because you want to save the greenery for the bugs, right? That's what those caterpillars need to feed on in order to get the energy to molt and to pupate into those butterflies. So these plants also are going to attract in those butterflies. They have the colors, they have the UV pathway, the nectar guides, if you will. I've talked about those in previous presentations. If you shine a UV light on some of these flowers, you'll notice these weird patterns. Some areas of dark, some areas of light, and they attract different insects. Those are called nectar guides, and that is actually what draws in those butterflies and those other pollinators. And so if that native plant disappears and it's no longer in the landscape, then you don't get any more pollinators. We get a lot of people that say every year they call in, where are all the butterflies? I used to have tons of butterflies and now I don't have as many. And that's because as we have become more and more developed here in the metro Atlanta area, you have much more sterile landscapes. Developers don't put in pollinating plants as a rule. They bulk purchase landscape plants that usually don't have any pollinating benefit to them at all, and they put those in the house. So the only way it happens is if you educate the public so that they can come back in and add some of these plants. All right, choosing. Don't fight the site. We have a saying here at Extension, right plant, right place. So you have to know what you're dealing with, right? You need to understand, does that plant need sun, full sun? Does it need shade? What kind of moisture does it need? Does it like wet feet? Does it need to be planted near a wet area? Like rain gardens, perfect spaces for those, like a cardinal flower. They tolerate and they really like wet feet, or swamp iris, but they don't do well in an upland site. Drainage, is it going to hold a lot of water? Or is it just going to drain right off? Organic matter, is it just dry clay? Or is there a lot of organic matter? What does that plant need? What's the pH that it needs? We tend to be a little bit more on the acidic side here in North Georgia, just because of the geomorphology of the soils. So we have a lot of clay, granite, that kind of thing, and we tend to be just more acidic. So probably like 6 to 6.2, 6.8. Most plants prefer that, and that's fine. Some prefer more acidic, like blueberries, azaleas, that kind of thing. And we can, definitely handle that. We don't have a limestone base to our geology here. That would be up and more in Kentucky and into Tennessee and parts of the Midwest. We don't have that. We have granite. We have a lot more magnesium in our soil. So we have hard water. We have definitely have that, but it's from magnesium. It is not from calcium. So you also have to look at what kind of an attractant is it? What color is it? Certain insects are attracted to certain plants and certain colors. I've done some pollinating insect webinars, which are very fascinating because you don't ever think about that. You might just notice you like a lot of color, and you put a lot of color in your landscape and you have a ton of different insects. You never really thought about it before, but the reasoning behind that is that different colors attract different insects. Different plants attract different insects. So if you have a wide variety of plants out in your landscape, you're going to attract a wide variety of insects, pollinators. Also look at blooming season. So some plants are going to bloom early spring, some midsummer, some fall. We even have some that bloom in the winter. And we're blessed here with all four seasons of growth. So we have plants that will actually bloom in the wintertime. We have Edgeworthia, paperbush plant that's actually out there blooming right now, and some others. And we have some early blooming weeds like henbit with those little purple flowers in your lawn that you hate so much. But that's actually an important food for bees for early emergers. Um, and then the size of the mature plant. So that goes without saying for any part of your landscape. You obviously don't want a 12-foot plant in front of your bay window, right? So you need to make sure that when you're thinking about where you're going to plant these plants, that you are taking into account their final length, width, and height. So if it's going to be a tall, broad, wide plant, put it in the back. Put the small stuff in the front. That way, it's kind of like a stair step. You can see it, the bugs can see it, and your neighbors won't get mad at you because it looks bad, and you won't have to worry about burglars coming in and breaking in because they've got a good place to hide behind your plant. All right, natural habitats in your landscape. So think about the different kinds of habitats you have in your landscape. A mature home that's was built in the 70s or 80s is going to have a lot more um, green space, probably taller trees, more shade, that kind of stuff, than a home that was just constructed last year. Unfortunately, developers like to come in and basically clear cut, and then they plant, a tree in the front yard, maybe something in the backyard, but it's a blank slate. And so you're going to have a lot more sun in a newer home than you are in an older home. So some of the natural landscapes, woodlands. Uh, this would be like for a shade or a part shade garden. Very shadowy, like you might have some types of, I'm trying to think of some wildflowers that are very tolerant. They're edge plants. You could put some native azaleas in there along the edge of the trees. If you have deciduous trees or trees that lose their leaves every year versus conifers or evergreens that keep their needles or their leaves every year, you'll get more sunshine, and some of those plants that live in the understory area will do wonderfully, and it looks very pretty. You could also do like a meadow or a cottage garden. That's kind of just a riot of colors, and that's a great one for a butterfly garden. You don't have to have it neat and orderly and tidy. You can just have a ton of wildflowers in there. Just make sure you're kind of following the rules of the short ones in the front and the tall ones in the back. Maybe you have a granite outcropping. We have a lot of granite here in this area, and due to the geology of this particular part of Georgia, you have a lot of these larger uprisings of granite. Stone Mountain is obviously a big one, so is Kennesaw Mountain and Panola Mountain, but you also have smaller outcroppings that eventually rise up. So you may have some rocks that the builders have left in your yard. Use those to your advantage. Plant around them. They can be very attractive. There are lots of different natives that thrive in that area. All you have to do is to go to some of the wilderness areas around like Acadia Mountain or Panola Mountain. They'll do nature hikes there, and you can see what grows in those particular areas. Aim for things like that. Wetlands, maybe you have a stream in the back or a riparian area, an area with wetter soil. So that's also can be the bottom of a hill. Maybe you got drainage issues with the neighbors and it tends to pool there. Use that as an advantage. Don't fight it. Work with it. Use it as a rain garden. Plant some plants in there that prefer that kind of soil and prefer that kind of wetness level. It will look great. It'll take care of that drainage problem, and you won't have to look at it and get mad all the time. And then ground cover. So there's a lot of hills here as well. There are tons of ground covers that will do very well in Georgia. That helps with erosion. So if you have been trying to grow grass and it's too shady, just give it up. Give up the grass. It's not doing you any benefits. You can plant as much grass seed as you want, but if you don't have 5 to 8 hours of sunlight a day, it's not going to work. If you have compacted soils that grow moss and nothing else, it's probably not going to work. So think about growing some ground covers that are native to the area that will help with your erosion problems, and you won't have to keep throwing grass seed on it and worrying about that. So how can you help the native pollinators? Well, obviously, plant those host plants. You want to help them reproduce. You don't want to inhibit that. Provide a source of shallow water. So we have in the summertime, we can go from rainy, rainy, rainy to all of a sudden 3 weeks and no rain. And the animals and the plants and the bugs and everything that live out there, they still need to drink. So if you can provide a shallow, you can use, dishes. If you have some old dishes that you're getting rid of, you can always put that into the ground, add some pebbles to it or some sand, make sure it's nice and moist, and that's a good seep for the butterflies. You can have a bird bath that you can turn into that, just so that you're providing a water source for the insects as well as birds. Provide shelter from wind and rain. I know everybody has those butterfly houses. I don't know if they actually use them. I've had one, but I don't think I ever had a butterfly in it. Now, those bee houses, yes, they do use those. And I do encourage you to trade out the straws that are in there. You can eventually get some viruses in there, and then that's not good for the bees. They'll have deformities and things. So every year, change those little tubes out. You can get those. Um, they sell them on Amazon, and you can cut them to size for your bee house. You can also use paper straws. They just need to be that very specific, I believe it's like a half to 3/4 of an inch size in the mouth of the straw. Remember the predator-prey relationship. So some plants and some animals, you don't want to attract in predators to get the good bugs. You want to attract in the predators to get the bad bugs. So sometimes we call them trap crops or trap plants, that can help some of the bad bugs, like for your garden, leaf-footed bugs. I hate those things. They love sunflowers. And then, that's a trap crop that pulls them away. Also, you want to be aware of birds. If you're feeding birds along with the bugs and that kind of thing, you'll have predators in the area, aerial predators. So just be aware of that. Another one, don't remove garden debris until spring. Why? Well, if you can avoid it in your backyard, I understand a lot of you have HOAs, but if you can avoid it, rake the leaves off to the side. Okay, as they fall, rake them off to the side and leave them. One, they offer free mulch, and nature will break that down for you pretty quickly to return those nutrients to the soil. But two, you get a lot of moths and butterflies and beetles and other things that overwinter in those leaves. If you remove them, you one, remove the habitat that they might live in, and two, if you wait long enough and you end up pulling those leaves and bagging them up and getting rid of them in December because you were just slow to it, you probably bagged up all of those bugs that are overwintering in that leaf pile. So if you have not gotten to it immediately upon raking those leaves and you get nasty grams from the HOA, just go ahead and just leave it there. Rake it into the corner, allow the bugs to use it, and then when it starts to warm up in the spring in April, when you're doing your yard work in the spring, wait until they emerge. So that would be like the April time frame. So they will be very thankful for it. But I'm a proponent of just putting the leaves into the woods, onto the edge, and just letting them decompose. And then minimizing use of chemicals, obviously. So a lot of people try to go completely organic, and that is absolutely fine. It does require more planning, especially if you have a lot of insects or plants that need a little bit more help, or you have neighbors that don't really do much with their yard. So, you might end up having more weeds and other things that you have to kind of fight. But there are things that you can do. All right, plant ecology. So we're going to speed it up a little bit. So there's a lot of different areas in Georgia. We have like 5 ecological regions in Georgia, all the way from the northwest part of the state, which is much more with limestone, to the northeast, Blue Ridge. Then we have the Piedmont area, which is where we are in central Georgia, or north central, which is Atlanta metro. Then we have the coastal plain, we have the fall line. So below that in the coastal plain, that was all area that was underwater long ago. in each of those areas, and we also have different hardiness zones. We go all the way from like a 6 up in the mountains down to a 9 at the bottom part of the state. So lots of different ecological regions, lots of different hardiness zones, lots of different plants, right? So you're also going to look at the ecology and the basic groupings in this way too. So yeah, I know you're like, another thing I have to keep track of. Yes, wet, moist, dry, upland, or bottomland. And each of those are going to be added into the different ecologies of Georgia. So wet would be like a wetland plant, something along a stream bank or a pond. Moist would be something that would be in a low spot in your yard that is perfectly happy, or something in a rain garden. Dry would be like an upland slope that is heavy clay, that doesn't get much in the way of moisture, doesn't hold moisture, and it gets a lot of sunshine. Upland is similar to that. Um, but you can have dry and shady as well. And then you have bottomland. That's area that can get inundated or flooded. That might be along a stream or a river, something like that. And you have 100 distinct environments and plant communities. You have a lot of diversity here. So they're going to grow there because they've adjusted to that local environment. I'm going to bring in that right plant, right place thing again that we say pretty regularly here with Extension, because why would you plant something that loves wet feet, something that we would consider a riparian plant that grows along a stream or a river? Why would you plant that in a really dry, heavy clay upland area? You wouldn't. It wouldn't live. It would die pretty quickly. And same thing, why would you plant, for instance, say a juniper down in a bottomland area? Most evergreens, conifers, I'll preface that. Most conifers do not like wet feet. They will die. Okay, they don't like it. They prefer dry and upland. And that's why you'll see a lot of pines in the southern part of the state, because it's typically more sandy soils, so they get a lot better drainage. And it doesn't hold a lot of water. You have, aquifers and that kind of thing, but the soils are not as heavy clay as they are here in the Piedmont. It's sandier. There is clay, of course, but yeah, so just a different ecology in the southern part of the state than here. In nature, you also have to take into the microclimate. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I just learned I have to know all about groupings of plants in addition to hardiness, in addition to geo regions. And now you're telling me that I have to look at microclimates? Yes, you do. The bottom of a hill will tend to be cooler than the top of a hill sometimes because cold air settles. On the side of a house, your southern side of your house tends to be much sunnier and warmer, and it gets more sun in the wintertime versus the northern side of your house. There's a lot of different things that you have to kind of keep in mind with regards to plants and how you're going to plant them and where you're going to plant them. So if you're a veteran gardener, it's probably all second nature to you, and you automatically know what all of these little microclimates and ecoregions are, and it's just there. And so you see a plant, you're like, oh, I wonder if I have a place to put that in my house. And you're like, yeah, that actually would work really well on the southeastern side of my house. So you may be, like I said, a veteran, and you know that, but you also might be a beginner, and that's just very intimidating. And that's okay. That's why Extension is here. We can help you with that. We're here to help educate you. So the 8 major habitats in Georgia, and like I said, I'm not going to go into this too much, but if you're up in the northern area, it's going to be cove hardwoods, mixed pine woods, forest gaps. And again, if you would like a copy of this slide deck, I am happy to share it. I'll have my email address on the back slide, and you can just simply send me an email and I will send a PDF of this to you. Rock outcrops, meadows, pine woods, bottomland forests, and swamps. So lots of different variety. And you can see, based on what I said on the previous slide, that all of that fits into these. So again, right plant, right place, right? So for the best results, you have to figure out where that environment is that plant's going to do best and match it in your house, in your property. So that means light, that means the soil with the pH, the amount of organic matter. When I say that, I mean like bottomland is going to have a lot more organic matter decomposing leaves, decomposing trees, branches, that kind of stuff, versus an upland area that doesn't have, maybe all the trees have been cut down on it and it's just heavy clay, that kind of thing. And drainage. Does it drain well or perk, as we kind of think about it? Or does it hold a lot of water? Moisture. Is it moist? Is it down near a stream or a riparian area that gets a lot of water? Does it flood occasionally? Does it just hold more water? Is it shadier? That kind of stuff. All right. Next up, let's talk about nature made or wild type versus cultivated or nativar. So here we have two versions of the same thing. You can see here we have the eastern blue star. The wild type or the wildflower is on the left, and it has a singular flower stalk with some pretty little blue flowers on it. And that's basically it. That is your native. So if you wanted to go straight up native, that is it. That is what you would plant. But the nursery industry is always looking to introduce new stuff to us. And so they use native plants as an inspiration, and then they go tinker around with them. So those, even though you can see they have the same scientific name, Amsonia, and I'm going to mess all this up. Yeah, I have to do these all the time, but sometimes I just prefer, instead of the tongue twisting scientific names, I just will call them by their cultivar names. In this case, blue ice, but Tabernet Montana, I think. And that's blue ice is the cultivar name. So you'll always see the cultivar name. It's going to have the little italics around it, blue ice. So what the nursery industry did was they took that wildflower and they tinkered around with it. That may mean that they did some interesting breeding with it, and maybe they got plants that had multiple flower stalks. Maybe they got plants that had multiple flower heads or blooms on the same flower stalk. And then they crossed them back to try to improve that performance of that particular plant until they ended up with blue ice. So you can see the difference here. You have one particular plant and it has one small flower stalk versus on the right, you have one plant, but it has many different branches of that plant, and each of those stems is going to have maybe one or two flower heads, more blooms, in other words. Maybe it's got more intense color. Maybe it was a very light blue here in this eastern blue star, but then they tinkered around with it and they got some of the offspring to have a more vibrant blue color. So they selected those, got rid of the rest, and then went in and started back crossing to try to intensify that blue. Maybe they've bred in some disease or insect resistance. We have lots of new varieties of crepe myrtles, for instance. I know it's not necessarily native, but they've bred in disease and insect resistance, tolerance to stress. There's a lot of different things that the nursery industry can work on where they take the native and they improve upon it. And that's basically called a nativar. So if you see a native for sale, but it has that distinction of that cultivar name, like blue ice, that means that it's been tinkered with, and that's a nativar. So it's not 100% native, it's an improved native. So here we have echinacea. So that's purple coneflower. There's a lot of medicinal uses for coneflower, E. purpurea. So echinacea, you can get all sorts of pretty colors now. They have taken coneflower and tinkered around with it. Let's see if there we go. They've tinkered around with it to get a lot of different colors, double blooms, more fragrance, because your typical echinacea is not going to have much of in the way of a smell. It's also purple. Some people love the purple. I love the purple. It actually has a fairly decent growth cycle. It doesn't peter out, as I call it. That's not a very scientific term, but it doesn't, it reseeds readily and it's easy to grow. But some of these, not so much. So these are all cultivars or nativars, if you would like to call them that. Sombrero orange, they've tinkered with the color. Razzmatazz, they've tinkered with the double bloom. Some of these are hybrids. So it's not quite echinacea, but it's a hybrid of some other type of plants back crossed with echinacea. And then you have fragrant angel down at the bottom, which smells nice, but does and looks kind of like echinacea, but kind of not. So these are the things that the nursery industry will do. So whether you want to be pure native and go shopping only at native plant sales, but if you see, again, the name like Sombrero Orange or Razzmatazz or Fragrant Angel, know those are nativars. Know those have been tinkered with. And so you're getting something that is not quite a native anymore. It's a improved variety of that native. So, ecological value of cultivars versus wild type. Well, that's interesting. And this is why a lot of people really focus in on that. Um, so, hemipterans, this is just, insects. I'm just kind of whiz over this. Um, 35 showed a preference for particular plant species over others, meaning they had a very specific host plant, right? Um, and so insect communities, or the ones that were feeding on those, associated with the cultivars, those are the tinkered with plants, were very distinct from that wild type plant. That's the native, the wildflower, if you will. Um, and so when you looked at the abundance of those insects or the biomass of those insects, that could be butterflies or anything like that. Hemipterans would be true bugs. um, it wasn't necessarily more consistent with those cultivars. So um, basically, when you boil it down to the last one, it says that the abundance and the diversity of those bugs is not really dependent on the plant material, but rather on the characteristics of the cultivars that distinguish them from the wild type. So they're looking for very specific things. I know you're like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Those bugs are looking for very specific characteristics in those plants. So if that cultivar exhibits that, they'll still visit it. If it doesn't, and that's been bred out, they won't. So that's kind of the take home. Um, so in other words, this is a kind of building on that. Cultivars with altered flower morphology, or if the flower looks different, are going to be visited by fewer pollinators and species than the wild types, because remember, they've co-evolved. So they're looking for very specific things. So if you've got, for instance, that razzmatazz coneflower, that has the double blooms, you may get some visits from pollinators, but if they're looking for that wild type echinacea, they're probably not going to get as many visits by bugs as the wild type echinacea would, because it's different. It's not the same. The morphology or what it looks like is different. And then, of course, sterile cultivars, which there are a lot of sterile ones out there that just don't have seeds. They don't produce seeds. They're not really going to have a lot of visits from some of the birds that would eat those seeds. So just know that there is that caveat to it. I'm a proponent of having a lot of different things. So you don't have to be true native, but it is good to have a lot of natives there. So native perennials. So we're going to kind of start to go through. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on here. Again, this is why I'm happy to share these the slide deck, because it will have all of this information in there. So if you would like that slide deck, I do encourage you to email me for that. I'm happy to share it. So the blue star, we've talked about that a couple times. Very clumping, very nice. It gets some fall color, and it's got these beautiful little blue flowers. It does prefer full sun to kind of part shade. It's tolerant, and you will notice a lot of these are tolerant of lighting conditions, but it does need well draining soil. That's not heavy clay, so you got to do a little work on there. Deer don't like it, so it is somewhat resistant to deer. And then at the bottom, you'll see the habitat. So if you want to request these slides, you can immediately see what the habitat is. It will do well in hardwood forests, floodplains, and stream banks. Okay. And then you have Eastern Columbine. So this is a really pretty one. You see this, it's very wide reaching. It's in the Midwest, it's in the Southeast, has really pretty flowers. There are a lot of cultivars of this. Again, a cultivar is going to be something that has been tinkered with by the nursery industry. So the native or the Eastern Columbine looks like this. Up at the top, it's kind of reddish with a yellow throat and very pretty. So full sun, partial shade, again, very tolerant. Slightly alkaline soils, which we don't have a lot of here unless you're messing with it via lime. And it's about 2 to 3 feet tall. So ignore the interesting scientific description of wood type down at the bottom. So rocky areas, woodland areas are good for this. You're going to see something probably more so up in the mountain areas. It is much more tolerant of slightly cooler conditions. So down in South Georgia, it's probably not the best for you, but up in the mountain areas and northern areas of the Piedmont, yes, it is. Butterfly weed. I love this stuff. So this one is perfect. If you have a big open backyard, new house, not much growing there, this stuff is super tolerant. It is butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. It has beautiful orange flowers. It is very tough. It's a tough plant, and it can tolerate full sun. It prefers well-drained soil, but will tolerate heavy clay as well. So it gets about up to 2 feet tall. It will continue to clump out, and you can certainly split it and move it around. And usually early June around where I am in the Atlanta metro area, it'll bloom. And so it's easy to see power line right of ways along the edge of highways, that kind of thing. It prefers dry, open woods, fields, and roadsides. So it is easy to see. Very showy, also a butterfly plant or a host plant for butterflies. So this is a favorite, and you can actually find this pretty readily. You can find seed for it too. It's hard to get it to grow, but you can find this plant pretty readily at some of the native nurseries around. I know Growers Outlet in Loganville has it, along with other milkweeds. Wild blue indigo. So this can get pretty big, 3 to 4 feet tall by 3 to 4 feet wide. So this is one you want to put in the back. Baptisia australis. So there are Baptisia cultivars out there, but this is wild blue indigo. You're going to find this one more along probably riparian areas. It tolerates wet feet, riverbanks, gravel bars, open meadows, that kind of thing. So this one would be a good one in shade, slightly moist soils or soils that you've amended a little bit, or if you have something, a stream near your back, in the back of your yard or something like that. But it's pretty tolerant of all light conditions. Green and gold. So this is fairly low growing, as you can kind of see by the picture, but it's pretty. It's got these really pretty little yellow wildflowers. So not very tall at all, less than a foot tall, but it will grow to about a clump that's probably up to 18 inches wide. So that's pretty decent. Moist woodland. So this is going to be a bottomland area. So if you have an area back in your yard that has trees with a stream, this would be a good option to grow in and around that area. It's a spring bloomer, real pretty. Um, you know, you know, I don't have these in my own backyard because I don't have a stream, but that's an option if you do. Coreopsis. This is a good one, Coreopsis grandiflora. So this is going to be your large flower. There are a lot of different varieties out there. There are a lot of cultivars of this also. So it's pretty tolerant of high temperature heat, dry sites where there's not much going on, prefers that full sun, but will do fine in partial shade and fairly well-drained soil. But again, it's pretty tolerant of even heavier clay, although it will do better if it's in a better amended soil. And so, this is great for a rock garden. So remember how I said if you have a rock outcrop, this is a good one to put in there. It will bloom most of the summer all the way through early fall and deadhead it, and it will keep blooming for you. Coneflower, we already talked about that a little bit. This is the true native variety, the Echinacea purpurea, and it's, 2 to 4 feet tall. It drops seed and will readily reseed if that is something that you want. Looks great. It will tolerate dry to slightly moist areas. It doesn't like really wet feet. But again, full sun, part shade, light shade, fairly tall, easy to reseed. If it gets a little bit more water, it reseeds more readily. It's a great native plant for having in your wildflower garden, and another good one for attracting butterflies. Boneset. This is a great one. Um, Typically, you'll see this kind of growing as a weed. People may not even realize they have it. You'll see it in late summer, and it is an important pollinator plant. Very innocuous. Innocuous. It doesn't really stand out. If you have a bunch of it in late summer, you can see it flowering. But again, this is a very important one for pollinators in late fall. Or early fall. Sometimes we call that time for honeybees anyway, dearth, which means there's not a lot of flowers that are flowering and providing food. And so the ones that are important, and this is one. So dearth can kind of happen June-ish to August-ish. And this one starts blooming. Notice some wasps on there. It's very important for wasps, and they are pollinators, so don't forget about them. Marshes, swamps, open, moist meadows, and ditches, or an area of poor drainage in your backyard that holds water after a rainfall. That's a good idea. Wild geranium, so it typically likes hardwood forest, shaded roadside areas, maybe along a drainage ditch, maybe along a stream bank. Looks like, a little bit like a geranium, the leaves do, with these little purple flowers. Fairly low growing, no more than 2 feet tall, but most of them are probably going to be less than that. Hepatica or liverleaf hepatica. This is a wildflower, one of the very first greeneries that pop up in the woods. You're going to find these in usually undisturbed hardwood areas. I have a lot of this up in my at my cabin, on the grounds of the cabin up in the mountains. It does prefer moist or more organic soil, stuff you're going to find where you're allowing the leaves to fall and just kind of decompose there. Coral bells. So there are a lot of cultivars of this. We sold some of those cultivars at our plant sale recently. Heuchera americana, and it gets to be, the flower stalks can make it up to about 2.5 feet tall, but really the plant itself is going to be about, 12 inches. And this is what the native heuchera looks like. So drainage slopes and woods, dry woods, rocky areas. I've seen some of this growing wild. It's very pretty. And it's a really nice addition to a woodland garden. Little brown jug. These flowers you can see there above the greenery, you don't really notice them even. They just kind of pop up, and it's basically a wild ginger. And so you see these evergreen leaves. I think I have some of that up there as well. I've also purchased some and added it into some of my gardens around my home, but it's very tiny. It's only like 3 to 6 inches, and you're going to typically find this in the grounds and around deciduous and pine forests, so successional forests. Successional means, you know, basically it starts out, you have a disturbed area, nothing growing, or a pasture or a field. You'll get pines that move in. They are very fast growing. And then those pines will grow up, and then over time, you'll start to get some hardwoods that move in. And then as those hardwoods start getting bigger, those pines die back, and you end up with a hardwood forest. So at this stage, it's mixed deciduous with coniferous or pines, and you'll see some of this. So you typically get more dappled sunlight because you still have some evergreen, you still have some hardwoods losing their leaves, but that's where you're going to typically find these guys. Spider lilies. So if you live near the Alabama-Georgia border, spider lilies are bottomland, they're wetland area, they're in stream banks and rivers. The Chattahoochee River, as it goes between Alabama and Georgia, will get very shallow, excuse me, with rocky shoals as you move further down near Columbus and along that area. And so too will the Savannah River if you move up towards North Georgia and Central Georgia, in between South Carolina and Georgia. You'll get a lot of really rocky, shoaly areas. You get these beautiful spider lily blooms every spring, and they set up shop in the shoal areas, the rocky shoal areas, and they will just have gorgeous blooms. I mean, it is something to behold if you happen to be out there and you're either drifting down to fish or just visiting, hiking, that kind of stuff. So it really needs a moist, wet bottomland environment. So if you have an area that holds water a lot, consider some of these. It would be a really good addition. So dwarf crested iris. These are very, very tiny. Um, I have some of these in my backyard, and they move a lot. It is a fantastic dry shade ground cover. So these little guys send out runners or rhizomes under the leaf litter, and they will pop up and they will fill in there are a lot, so a lot of people have English ivy and it will absolutely take over dry shade. This stuff does well in the same location. You don't have to worry about it creeping up your trees, and you get these beautiful little blue blooms with the yellow throat every spring, usually around Easter. Probably a little pushed back this year because we're having some late freezes, but they you'll get a carpet of these little beautiful blue flowers. I probably have some to share. Hit me up. I might be able to help you. I have a lot of these in my backyard. So they do spread, not invasively so, but they do make a really nice ground cover for a hardwood bottomland forest. Virginia iris or southern blue flag, this would be a nice option instead of bearded. Um, it does particularly care for moist areas. So if you have a rain garden, this would be a very good option for that. They prefer marshes, wet ditches, swamps, open areas, that kind of stuff with lots of sun. They're going to have kind of a purpley violet blue with yellow or white in the throat. Blazing star, marsh blazing star, or liatris. So liatris this is the wild version of the plant that you can purchase. There you go, Liatris spicata, that you can purchase at the store. They typically will sell these tubers or the plants. But yeah, this is the wild version of Liatris. As an aside, it's not an invasive here, but in certain parts of the country, it does very well, and it is considered semi-invasive. So again, the whole microclimate, and depending on what your hardiness zone is, and your geologic region, you have to incorporate all of those in when you're talking about invasives. I've gotten into some conversations with folks over the last several years about how we can't just say because it's invasive in one part of the country, it's going to be invasive in another part, because it isn't. It depends a lot on multiple variables, and you have to look at all of those variables to see what's going to happen. So in one part of the country, it might be, in another part, it may not be. And it may be, a native may turn into an invasive in a different part of the country. So it really it depends on a lot of things, a lot of things. Cardinal flower, a personal favorite of mine for moist areas. It has these beautiful small flowers that bloom. They look a little bit like a praying mantis. But lobelia, we sold some of that at our plant sale. Butterflies love this. They will come visit it. So again, if you need plants for a wet or a moist area, this would be a perfect one. Lobelia, this again, swamps, stream banks, roadside ditches. If you have a drainage issue in your backyard and you're looking for solutions, these are great solutions to help slow that water down and for absorption. We really preach keeping water on your property, not letting it go into a storm drain. And if you have a lot of issues, this might be part of the solution. Bee balm, Monarda. This is another one that is there are cultivars out there, but also the wild variety, the Monarda. This can get kind of tall. Um, but it spreads and it loves areas, moist mountain woods, bottomlands, stream banks, and seeps. It does prefer a little bit more sun. It does not like fertilizer, and it will die back if you fertilize it, so don't fertilize it. It gets everything it needs from the soil. And it is pretty obvious about where it likes and where it doesn't like to grow. So if it's not doing well, just move it around and see if it likes that area better. Bergamot, it's also a Monarda and Appalachian bergamot, and it prefers a little bit more of an upland area than the bee balm does. So you'll see it on woodland edges. The color of the flower is a little bit different. Roadsides. These are in the pollinator. It's one of the host plants for certain pollinators. So if you can fit these in your yard, then definitely do so. These, because they are the natives, powdery mildew might be an issue. So we do try to suggest to folks to leave a little bit of space instead of getting them all clumped up. Spotted horse mint. So mints are great. We have mountain mint is great pollinator. Not the one that you put in your tea. You can, but not this one. These are the natives. So this is great for dry, sandy soils. If you're in South Georgia, you can put this in there. It's a great pollinator plant. Rocky woodland areas. So if you have some rocky outcrops on your property, you can put this down there. Maritime forests, so down near Savannah, or even along the eastern seaboard, this is good. Smooth beard tongue. So this one is a nice clumped plant, and then it sends up these beautiful flowers. It can get up, the flowers stalks can get up to 3 feet tall. So penstemon is, and there are a lot of cultivars out there, so just make sure that you're actually getting the real native. Garden phlox, again, there are a lot of cultivars out there, different colors, that kind of thing. But they do prefer the stream banks, so a little bit wetter feet, a little bit richer soil. So it's a good woodland type garden plant if you have part sun. Creeping phlox, this is a short version, so only a half foot to a foot tall, and it does clump and spread. Phlox, this is one. We also have a lot of cultivars of that, but this is a good rock garden one. So very hot, tolerant of hot and dry conditions, preferring morning, all day sun is great. And it has those beautiful, pretty flowers in the spring. It's one of the things you're like, oh, look at the pretty phlox as you're driving along the countryside, and it's kind of growing on the roadside area of yards. Solomon seal, this is a favorite. We usually have the variegated version, which is a cultivar. But if you look out in the woods, if you're hiking in the woods in early spring, you'll notice what looks like a version of your Solomon seal. But this is the native version. Excuse me. And it doesn't look that exciting, but it's still the wild version. So I have it intermixed with the cultivars in my yard, and it looks fantastic. It just isn't variegated. You have your black-eyed Susans or your Rudbeckia, open fields, prairies. Again, this is another one to mix with coneflower. It looks absolutely beautiful. Wrinkled leaf goldenrod. I know some people are like, no, man, I'm not putting any goldenrod because it's an allergy issue. And so it's more ragweed. You might have some issues, but Soldago rugosa, this is a cultivar fireworks, but you can get a lot of the natives that are just, part of the background, and they're actually good pollinator plants. And these are some that are pretty tolerant of both full sun and moist soils. So again, drainage issues. New England asters, fairly tall growing. Most people are probably going to think of it as a weed, but the pollinators find it very valuable, and it's going to, you can fiddle with it a little bit to make it a more compact growth. So just like you would deadhead some of your plants, this would be a good option for this one. You can kind of trim it back a little bit, but it's pretty tolerant. Again, moist open woodlands, prairie areas, disturbed sites, stream banks. So if you've moved into a new home and you have kind of a damp area, this would be a good one. trilliums. So we sold some of these thanks to the Georgia Native Plant Society. So these are in bottomlands and forest areas, riparian type forest areas. They're one of the first little wildflowers to pop up. I have some of these at home. I saw them about a week and a half ago pop up, and it made me really happy. All right, so we're running really late. I'm going to just kind of click through and just give you the visual, but again, request the slides if you would like more. So purple lovegrass, I've got some of this in my right of way. Pink muhly grass. So muhly grass is a great substitute for pampas grass or some of the other miscanthus type grasses that are currently planted, which can be kind of invasive in certain areas. Switchgrass, I have some of this in the power line right of way. It does really well. If you have an area that won't grow much else, this is a good option. Little blue stem, again, another one, woodland edges, open woodlands, bunch grass, and then trees. We've got dogwoods, flowering dogwoods, which is an understory tree, not one you plant out in the middle of your very sunny front yard. Black willows, wild cherries, and the hosts. So you have your butterflies, catalpa trees, river birches, and then here's some resources. You've got Georgia Native Plant Society. So you've got the QR codes that will take you to those particular resources. UGA does have a publication, Native Plants for Georgia, Part 3, Wildflowers. So if you'd like more information on that, you can go check out that QR code, and then the Georgia Native Plant Society has some really nice lists of natives that are great for the Georgia Piedmont and other parts of Georgia. So this just happens to be the Piedmont because that's where we are, but you can use that QR code to go visit there. And again, just reach out to me and I'm happy to share the slide deck. So this is my email address. You can catch me here. And again, a big thank you to Dr. Bodhi Panisi for putting this wonderful little native presentation together. You know, she's a great person and we don't see enough of her. She's super, super busy, but we love her stuff here at Extension. But you can definitely check out these places, these two visuals here. You've got the sign up for the other classes that I do on the left. And then if you want to check out some of my older recordings on the YouTube channel on the right, I try to put everything up there that I record unless it gets corrupted or something like that, which hasn't happened in a really long time. But there's all sorts of stuff that you can find there on all sorts of topics. And I, you know, anything. So if you get bored in the middle of the night and you want to help falling asleep, go check that out. I'm sure you'll probably find something interesting there. All right, let's see what we got, if we have any messages here. Hey, Emily, I see you. Thank you. Can nurseries breed plants to be deer resistant or deer toxic? The short answer is you probably wouldn't want that in your landscape if they did. Because it would be toxic to other animals as well. So some things are going to taste really good to deer. Deer, we tend to work with them psychologically to get them to move on by harassment methods or removing the food source. They do like things like hostas and other stuff. Most of the natives, they may eat, but if your neighbor has something that they like more, they'll probably move over there. So generally, when we're trying to get animals to move on when they're considered nuisance wildlife, we look at removing the food source, we look at harassment. So that might mean a motion-activated sprinkler system that you set up in the evening when the deer come out, and then as the deer come to feed on your hostas or whatever else you have in your landscape, they trip the motion sensor and they get a spray of water in their face and they don't like it. So they're like, what the heck? And then they leave. And so what you're doing is you're altering their behavior by harassing them to get them to move on. You may have a dog that likes to chase deer. Fence your yard in. If the deer come in and they start to munch on your plants, oh, I'm going to let my little dog out who runs after the deer and harasses the deer. The deer doesn't like that. So the deer is like, I'm going to go someplace where I'm not going to get harassed. That's called harassment. Perfectly fine. It doesn't hurt them. We may even suggest that you put a temporary hot wire out. They do make small boxes that are solar activated. I have one in my garden, and you temporarily put a line around. A line of wire around at a certain level, and then you put a little aluminum foil with peanut butter on it. And that peanut butter attracts the deer who will come over and try to feed on that peanut butter and get zapped. It's not enough to hurt them, but it is enough to make them go, "Oh, I don't like that." And before too long, you've helped train that deer to stay away. So we would rather you rely on those methods versus something toxic, because anytime you have a plant that's toxic, there are possibilities that children might eat it or other wildlife might eat it, and we really don't want that. Um, okay, so Jennifer Weaver, if you'd like the plant deck, make sure you email me, and I'll make sure that you get it. Thank you. And email address, it's on this slide here. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see, anything else? If you want the slide deck, the email's right there, lisa.klein@gwinnettcounty.com. I try to differentiate my Gwinnett County email from my UGA email, and handle different things in different emails. I will respond to it, the UGA, but I typically put the Gwinnett County one down. Looking for more native plants in my yards for all the reasons you discussed. Yard is more alkaline due to prior adding lime. I have southern facing home and the plants I need in front yard. So first of all, get a soil test. Zone it. So you're looking at your front yard, your backyard. You want to get that, break it into zones so that you can take your random samples from your backyard, mix it all together, get a soil test so we know kind of what we're dealing with pH. The lab will actually give you recommendations based on what you're trying to grow. So if you'd like to grow ornamentals, which these would fall under, natives would fall under, they can give you some suggestions for if you need to lower the pH, which it may be at 6.8, and that's fine. You don't need to lower it anymore. The most I would expect would be 7 or 7.2. If it's much more than that, then somebody went really crazy with lime around here. But I've rarely seen, plants are somewhat adaptable. So they're pretty tolerant of a range of pH because there is a wide range. Here we have a high lime buffering capacity, meaning you got to add a lot of anything, a lot of lime or a lot of sulfur to change your pH here in Georgia. So, or in this part of Georgia. So it takes a lot to really mess around with the pH, but I would, 6.9 to 7. Now that's still within reason. I wouldn't be too concerned with that. That would not be something I think the lab would suggest you having to add sulfur to get it moved down. I would say if they were recommending that, your pH would probably be 8 or 9, maybe 7.5. But I don't think that would fall into what I would suggest you need to do to adjust the pH. And mostly just for figuring out the area, it's looking at what you're dealing with in that microclimate and soil type also. Let's see. Anything else? Does anybody have any other questions? Yeah, it's hard to find full sun plants. So I will mention Georgia Native Plant Society. Currently, they are not, I don't believe they're selling to the public yet. I think that is their goal. You can also check out, if you go to the UGA Botanical Garden, they will have plant sales pretty regularly. They will sell natives there. Check out their website. I don't know when the next one is. They usually have one in the spring. I want to say maybe in April. It's a great place to visit anyway, if you can. They have lots of beautiful plants on their grounds, and occasionally, and I think most times, they'll actually have some natives for sale out in front by their gift shop. But yeah, lots of opportunities there. And there are other native plant sales that happen pretty regularly around the metro area, in any metro that you're in. You can also check out some of the Master Gardener sales. I know Gwinnett County Master Gardeners will have their own plant sale it's April, whatever that Saturday is, the 25th or 26th of April. whatever that Saturday is. And they have a lot of natives there. All of their plants, for the most part, except for the vegetables that are grown by seed, are actually either saved out of plant digs in people's yards or split off from plants in their own yards. So we have a lot of people in that particular association that love natives. And so there's a lot of good opportunities to get natives there. Trees Atlanta does a native plant sale. Yes. So you can go to their website and check it out. And the Georgia Native, yeah. So Georgia Native Plant Society, we sold some plants in our plant sale last week. Every year we have a fundraising plant sale. It's usually that March 12th, that Thursday. So it could be the 10th, it could be the 11th, 12th, 13th of the spring, but we'll have a bonus sale the day of, and we typically will sell native plants, we'll sell some vegetable plants, we'll sell fruit trees and bushes and things like that, and then a lot of new ornamentals, native azaleas, that kind of stuff. So look for Master Gardener based sales, and you'll probably find a lot of natives, along with a lot of just very small nurseries that will sell their own stock that they get. There you go. Georgia Native Plant Society having an annual spring sale at the Grove at Willis Park in Alpharetta. So there are different chapters of the Georgia Native Plant Society. So each chapter may have a separate sale. So definitely check that out. And anybody else that would love to put, if they know of a particular plant sale that's coming up this spring, feel free to put that in the chat box. But they're all over the place. This is one situation where ChatGPT would be your friend. You can just type in there, hey, can you tell me about all the native plant sales in my area around, and then fill that in. And then it'll spit back with all the different plant sales that are available, as long as it can find them on the internet, on what dates and things like that. So it's a good opportunity to get out there and support some of these small organizations, and pick up some really awesome native plants. ChatGPT. Yes, it's a good resource. It's easier to consolidate data. Norcross Garden Club plant sale, yeah, they probably will have some, Leanne, some good native plants. So yeah, you just have to kind of keep your ear to the ground, ask around. A lot of garden clubs will also host them, and if you're near a metro area, there's going to be a lot of those. So just kind of keep your ear out to see when. Oh yeah, the Clips newsletter. That's put out by the Georgia Master Gardener Association, and they list this presentation was listed there. We always list our stuff there, but they also list plant sales. It's a free newsletter that you can sign up for. You don't have to be a master gardener, but you can get the newsletter. They send all sorts of good stuff, and will tell you all about the news in and around the horticulture master gardener slash gardening industry. So all these cool plant sales and things like that, garden tours, other stuff along that you might want to go to, that you're looking for something to do fun, if like a garden tour or plant sale or something like that. So lots of good opportunities for getting some of those natives and sticking them in your yard. And again, it's okay if you have non-natives too. I have lots of non-natives in my yard, but I also have natives, and those help the pollinators. So spread the word to your friends and your neighbors. Give them a gift of a native plant, and ask, say, hey, I'll even put it in the ground for you. But yeah, that's how we let people know. We give them the education so that they understand why it's so important to have natives in their landscape. So that is basically it. Again, if you would like a copy of my slide deck, I'm happy to share. My email is right there, and send me an email. And this has been recorded, so it will go up on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. Sorry I wasn't able to get through all of the good stuff, but the slide deck has all the relevant information, so you know exactly what you're looking for if you have a particular area in your yard that you want to fix. So that is about it, and thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a good afternoon. Bye.